All right. Hello, my name is Bradley Butler, and I am the Executive Director and Curator at Main Street Arts in Clifton Springs, New York. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. Tonight, I am joined also by a great group of artists for this exhibition. The great group of artists included in this exhibition, Daily Muses. The focus of the focus of the discussion will be on the idea of the muse and where ideas and artistic inspiration come from, and we'll also get a chance to hear from each of the artists. So I'm going to show a few images of the exhibition as I talk about it here. And I'd also like to point out that the lettering for the exhibition was designed by Lori Freer. That's what you're seeing right now. And just to go through, in case anyone has not had the opportunity to see the exhibition yet, here are a few images. So this exhibition was co-curated by Vickie Pierre, and in addition to her work, the show also includes artwork by Julie Davidow, Lori Nozick, Michelle Polissaint, Loren Santiesteban, Sara Stites, and Michelle Weinberg. And artwork included in the exhibition consists of collage, drawing, painting, photographs, and mixed media pieces. And the title of the show, Daily Muses, references the perpetual search for creative inspiration on a daily basis through common interactions, observations, and surprise encounters. We have done 2 other virtual events in conjunction with this exhibition. We did a talk with Vickie, and I should mention Vickie was also a former artist in residence here at Main Street Arts. She was here for a residency in November of 2019. So we had a talk with her during the opening reception, and also we did a virtual walkthrough, and you can see both of those videos on our YouTube channel. So we invite you to check those out at your leisure. And and I think what I'll do is, so we've got 6 of the 7 artists joining us here tonight, and I will invite each of them to talk about their work and introduce themselves. And while they talk about their work, I'll also have an image of their work up for you to see. So first we have Lori Nozick. So you can go ahead.
So I'm muted. Okay. Hi, I'm Lori Nozick. I just moved to Los Angeles from Miami, which is where I know all these other wonderful women from, artists. My background is actually in painting, but after I got my MFA at Pratt, I decided I was more of a sculptor. Started doing wall reliefs, and then I started doing very large scale sculpture installations, most of which were interactive, meaning people would walk on them, go through them, in some way physically interact with them. Then, when I moved to Miami, I had an instant community of artists. In fact, many of the artists in the show, we were part of a studio program called Fountainhead Arts. And I have to say my time in Miami was extremely evolving for me as an artist. I got a chance to do large scale projects and very public projects that I never might have otherwise, coming from New York. And people were incredible. So I was doing that for a long time. And then 3 years ago, I was in a very bad accident and had 8 broken bones. And once I recovered from that, I realized I would probably never be able to do large sculpture again. And right after that, COVID hit. So during the COVID pandemic, both in order to stay creative and not to go crazy, I started this series I called the Quarantine Collages. I needed to use materials at hand, easy, and for some reason I worked quite quickly. And so I started making collages and loved them a lot of people liked them, and I found that they were not as removed conceptually from my sculpture as I thought. My concepts with sculpture and installation had a lot to do with placemaking and dealing with architecture and environment and how they intersect in different ways. And a lot of my work transcends time periods and historical periods, and there's a layering involved. And I found that the collages, I looked for things, images that made a connection with architecture and structure and environment and their intersection. So it was the same concept, and created what turned out to be a series of very multi-level, almost illusionistic collages, sticking with this pattern, which I also had never done before. So I have to say that, as somebody was saying in our earlier conversation, when Loren, when one door closes, another one opens kind of thing, I was able to return in a way and enliven something that I had maybe done to some degree in the past, but could find a whole new life and meaning for. So I've started doing these collages, and they're leading to a lot of other things. So what I can say inspires me on a daily basis is pretty much what's in front of me. Or this one, for example, uses, it's actually a rubbing of something I did a long time ago. I'll call it a drawing. And then architectural drawings that I had done that I then printed. And so I was using these images of other projects that were on a large scale in this to create something new.
Great. Well, thank you, Lori. And I mean, this, the idea of, calling these COVID collages and, thinking about something that you did during that time, I mean, it really—
Quarantine collages.
Quarantine collages.
Being alone, being alone.
Yeah. It's really interesting to see how, we all took something that we had to go through, and then, where does it go from there? What do we kind of take out from that time? And it's been interesting to see, especially how artists, have dealt with that. For the most part, I think something really great has come out of that for a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you.
And so next, Vickie, would you like to talk to us a little bit about your work?
I'm muted.
There you are.
Yes, so should we talk about where I'm from? I feel like we've done that so many times at this point.
Oh yeah, you can go ahead, because I mean, if people
from Miami.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm originally from New York, born and raised in New York City, and moved to Miami in the early mid to late 90s. And similarly to Lori, I immediately found an incredible art community to join. And I've been making art there for all of these years since. And I just recently moved further north of Florida to Vero Beach, Florida. And I've been here for a couple of months now, so I'm still getting settled. So I haven't found my art community yet. But anyone on Facebook who's in Vero Beach, contact me. And so for the exhibition, what I decided to do was sort of studies of my usual larger works, which is a series called Poupées in the Bush. And in French, poupée means doll. And the works kind of started out in that I was using a lot of rubber stamps of Snow White, Cinderella, and Sleeping Beauty. And I was kind of deconstructing them And when I was doing that, I was thinking a lot about an artist whose work I enjoy a lot, and that's Hans Bellmer. And he would take these poupées, these dolls, mannequins, and deconstruct them, take them apart. And in doing so, created these new kind of physical, figurative sculptures. But within that, there was also a sense of violence and a sense of danger. And I just was always very much drawn to it. I'm really big into surrealism also. So thinking about dreams and fantasy and alternate realities. And so when I started doing the Poupées in the Bush series, I wanted to take the Disney characters, kind of turn them on their heads, take them apart, put them back together, and not in this similarly violent way as Hans Bellmer or the surrealists usually do, but I definitely wanted there to be some sort of tension, but also kind of playful and just pretty and beautiful, and just very feminine. And the other part of the Poupées in the Bush title also comes from my study of National Geographic. And I used to have these magazines when I was a kid, and I just thought it was very interesting to see women or indigenous people, men and women, from other cultures in Africa or in Asia, and how they were just always so naked and bare and raw. And something about that seemed very natural to me and quite beautiful. But the other side of that, which I kind of really didn't start thinking about until I got older, was just the racialization, the sexualization. It was just very odd for me to consider. And so I'm still kind of investigating it even today. I'm still thinking about it and trying to, I guess, just reconcile it, in my work, and, why is it so beautiful to me? So these drawings or works on paper, they're drawings, they're studies, but they're also, fully realized works. And as I said earlier, usually the work is a lot larger, but I wanted to do these little pieces. I thought they'd be very intimate and have a sweetness to them. It also allowed me to work just kind of very tiny, and that's a little more challenging than what I usually do. And so cutting up little pieces of paper, tiny pieces of paper, can be very tedious. But there's something really fulfilling about it once it's done. And similarly to Lori, there's sometimes a layering of different collage papers, and but for the most part, I just lay them as they are on the surface. So that'll be the brown body or the black body. And yeah, I'm not sure what else. We can get more into it.
Yeah. And I think, thinking about the scale of these too, I mean, remembering the work that you were making when you were here for your residency, along these same or similar lines, I think this has been an ongoing body of work, and it's interesting to see them, at this scale, the 8x10 versus the ones you were working on in the studio, which were much larger.
Yeah, there's
really,
a sweetness about the size.
Yeah, definitely.
I like it. It feels very intimate.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, thank you, Vickie. And next we have Michelle Lisa.
Hi. So my name is Michelle Lisa Polissaint. I'm a visual artist and arts organizer based in Miami, like I guess everybody else. I'm Haitian American, and so a lot of my work deals with identity, place, and for the most part, it is me just responding to events, questions, thoughts, and experiences. So, and I say responding in the sense that, like, for example, I did an entire photographic series about visiting Haiti, and especially having not seen Haiti since just after the earthquake in 2010. That was just, it kind of like sparked something in me to be back home, recognizing that as a Haitian American, I don't really feel connected to home. And so in general, my work ever since college, where I went to FIU, and I got a degree in photography and fiber-based painting, my work always kind of felt separate, like photography and textiles are really separate. And so the work that's on view at the space now is all from a series called The Ballad of Me and You, which is a longstanding series that I've been producing that essentially is meant to be my way of responding to romantic relationships and situations. So taking those experiences and making them into work, and kind of forcing myself to meditate on the experience of being with that person or not with that person, or the end of that relationship, etc. And so the work is, so it started in college. I printed some photographs on paper and just started playing with sewing on them, and then put them in a box and never looked at them again. And then when I was in my studio one day, I was just cleaning and I remembered that I had these pieces, and I thought, like, there may be a way to manifest this work into a textile work, like for real. And so a friend of mine ran a print shop, and he printed some of them on fabric for me and let me test it out to see how I liked it. And so I ended up producing a new series of work where I'm printing photographs related to those relationships, and then using like embroidery techniques on top of them. It's funny because the last image, it's like one of the most embellished ones, but because of photography doesn't do great with textiles, you can't even see what's the embellishment. But each one of the pieces just has like hints of different reflections. Like, for example, this one is like a silhouette, kind of like the leftovers of a person. The first piece is the first piece that had like the blue figures on it was a conversation that I was recalling. And then the piece with the feet was kind of like me meditating on kind of like a longer standing situationship, as people like to call it. So yeah, that's kind of like where most of my work it comes from, is just the response to the world around me. Typically, I do make a point to ensure that when I'm responding, it's coming from a perspective that I think is necessary. I am kind of a person who only speaks when necessary, and I think the same of my practice as well as an artist. So I only respond when I think that what I'm putting out into the world adds to the discourse versus just disrupts it or kind of blurs it in any way. And that's kind of it.
Great, thank you. And it's really interesting, because when this work arrived to the gallery, it came in a very small, package. And, you think about the scale of these. I mean, I think they're what, 5 feet square or roughly. Yeah. And they have such a great presence in the show. And it's so interesting to think about, the scale of something and how that can shift, because they'd really, I think the way that it's so saturated on that fabric too, it's just like they have such power in the show. So
yeah, textile is good for that. You just put it in a tiny box and then seal it up, and then it looks when it gets there, it looks so much bigger. But yeah, and also it's just nice it makes it a little cheaper to ship a little bit.
For sure. Thank you. So next we have Loren.
Hi. Hey. So I'm just waiting for. Should I just start talking now? I guess. So I'm actually from New Jersey. I was born there, grew up there, and moved to Miami right before Hurricane Andrew. So that was like a really nice welcome to South Florida. But Yeah, I've oscillated back and forth between New York, New Jersey, and Miami pretty much my whole life. I went to School of Visual Arts. But I met, I would say, a lot of my getting to know the artists in Miami has been when I've been involved in the museum world. That's how I met Vickie. That's how I met Sara and Michelle. And then I met Lori because I had a studio at the Fountainhead. And so that's how we all kind of got to know each other and stuff. But yeah, my work, so these pieces, I have to comment on the pandemic because psychologically and emotionally that took a tremendous toll on me, as I mean, I guess everybody, right? But I felt in terms like my work almost came to a halt during that time. I was at home. I was about 7 months postpartum with my second child, and I was working remotely full time. And, you know, I would try to, you know, do work. At the time that we went into the pandemic, I was doing larger mixed media type of like painting drawings, you know, working with chemicals and building up the surfaces and doing all these layers. And when we went into this lockdown, I felt so overwhelmed by everything that just doing a small little drawing or starting these drawings was like a win for me. Everything just felt like so much. And at the core of what I do, I draw. That's the core of what I do. And as an artist, I mean, I've done all this other stuff. I've metalsmithing. I've done, you know, yarn bombing installations. I do mixed media paintings and stuff and printmaking. But at the core of what I do is drawing. So I kind of just got back to the basics of that. And that's what my inner dialogue, my comfort zone was, you know, sink or swim. Like you're like, I will do this. And I would do these like half drawings. So a lot of these were partially or almost completely done or in this mid process. And I'll work on multiple things at once. So this piece here, oh, and you see all of these, like, this one's actually a larger drawing. This was a larger one, and it's all colored pencil with gouache. And there's actually, I started, even though it's just a drawing, I still manipulate the concept of layering and playing around with different materials. But this also has acrylic brilliance, luminosity in it. So when light hits it, it's like this brilliance in it. But I really, for me, my narrative is really animals and plants and telling this story about humanity through the what we consider the primitiveness of animal nature. And that's really what feels intrinsic to me. And like, I also get really obsessive with my lines. So this is all pen, and then color paper, color pencil, and there's ink in here. I work a lot in my larger pieces with a fountain pen, like dip, a quill. And then that paper is actually from, I want to say the 70s. It was given to me by my high school art teacher at Killian. And it was like in some, he went to Pratt. He was this really cool guy. He actually owns a gallery in Greensboro, Alabama, I think, North Alabama, I'm sure. And so he had this amazing gold, beautiful paper, and I never knew what to do with it. And it was just so delicate. And it really felt, when Vickie came to me with this opportunity, it felt intrinsic to this, because when I started doing these types of animals, I know I'm jumping around a lot, I apologize, I tend to do that. But when I started doing these animals, these specific type of drawings, I was trying to find a way to not scream. you know, like you're so overwhelmed and you see all of these vibrations kind of happening around these animals, like they're kind of exploding or they have this energy kind of coming out of them. And the paper for me signified this part of myself when I romanticized the idea of this process of becoming an artist. I was at this precipice of about to going to, you know, college, and then utilizing it now as a woman, obviously in my 40s, and in this time and with kids. It felt very like full circle, creating these complicated animals that have these vibrations coming out of them, like turning into this being. And that's kind of how I tied it into like my own process. So in a way, they do discuss me and what I'm going through at that time. But a lot of the times too, like it's a commentary on things that I'm observing and that I'm living with. Like, for instance, and the paper I carved into the paper as well. Of course, I'm like reaching towards my camera, like, hi. No. I'm like, I'm going to show you. So like the rats piece, the first one that Bradley showed, it's actually all these rats piled on top of each other. And it's called If You Have It, I Want It. And they're all like, they think on the outside, this cheese, they see this beautiful cheese, right? And they're all like, oh, piling and suffocating each other for it. But little do they know, on the other side of that, it's rotted. You know, that goal, that thing that's being sold to them, everybody else has it, you know, keeping up with the Joneses, like, I want it. It's a fallacy. It's not true. And that's kind of the concept behind this piece. And I think, you know, that's something that we all kind of battle with at some point in our life. Like, you know, oh, is that worth it? Is that not worth it? And so that was also me processing that and then making a commentary on that. But I do like, just like how I tend to have conversations. I do jump around a lot when I'm making work and stuff. But I don't know what else to say. And then I think there's like a fourth piece that was just a drawing, a standalone drawing, with the bird. There was, hold on.
I just have I had three images for each.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. You only have 3 pieces. That's right. Yeah, there was a fourth piece of just the bird. And that really, if you ever have the chance to see it, shows kind of like this thing coming out of the bird, this drawing. But these are actually small. And I totally feel what Vickie was saying about working smaller. It feels like a home to me when I'm working on these intensely intricate, deep, it's like cathartic, you know, when you're just kind of whittling away at it. It's a wonderful process. I love process. It's you know, it's like, I don't know, it's definitely part of my dialogue. But I think I'm done yammering. Sorry.
No, thank you, Loren. Thank you. And let's see. So we've got Sara next. You just gotta unmute there. There you go.
Is that okay?
Yep. And then I'll switch your. Yep. Go ahead. You're good now.
Are you going to show all 4 things?
So I've got the 2 photographs, and then I've got one, the Napoleon one.
Oh yeah, but it's not. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd rather see the photo. I mean, the regular piece first of this, if I could. Or here's the Napoleon. Okay. So these, I dug back into some work I did a few years ago. This isn't just current. And this is a little bit of a strange picture because it is lacking the blue for some reason. But it was when I discovered Yupo paper, and I realized that I could work on it with oil paint. And so I was experimenting with it, and with my interesting dialogue with representation, between representation and abstraction, is always in every piece I do. And here I'm always letting myself do this representational thing, and then pulling back and making a joke out of it. But it's fun to do. So I think that sort of explains this work. He just made me think of Napoleon. And I was really just experimenting with how to put the paint on and represent something. And I think I had some ideas about, these are pretty big, like 5 feet square. So I was also thinking about, because I am also a person who draws, and drawing is very important to my work, I thought maybe I could just make these huge drawings with some paint on them. And that was my idea behind it. And I really enjoyed working on the Yupo paper, where you can, put down a color and then, or an image, and then wipe it off, and it leaves a lot of echoes. So there was this sort of starting to have an interest in different, in layering. And I also just thought erasing was pretty interesting, and constantly changing it, but yet there's an echo of what you're after underneath. So then so do you have the one of this one that, yeah. And then this is just something that I got into doing in a kind of lighthearted manner, but I use my work. When I finished a series, I try to photograph it with things in front of it to be more playful with the image. And these are wires that I found in a basement of a building, and they're colored. And then there's a few other things, but I'm basically playing with the composition of the piece and with the mystery of figuring out what you're actually looking at. So it's a lighthearted reaction to the painting that might be more serious underneath. And I was putting some blue in here because I had been using no color before. In the early series, I did the first series, I didn't use any color, or maybe a brownish tint. And then I was playing around with the idea of adding some color to the big pieces. And that was the beginning of my using a lot of color, was what I'm doing now. And it's quite different, but I'm still that same dialogue between the representational and the abstract, and how they can work together to engage the viewer as much as possible. I think that must be my main path of thought right now, and has been for a while. So I don't know if you have the other ones.
Yeah, I've just got the other photograph of the.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And then this is the other one. I call this he, she. And playing with the idea that we're animals, or animal, the basic attractions that we have are, we're still basic animals pretty much. So I'd like to make an animal have the personality of a human, or vice versa. And here, once again, I'm just playing with the composition. I'm trying to hide things so that the viewer takes a while to look at it. Threw in a dog toy just to, for a little chuckle. And these are other things that I just picked up around my studio on the spur of the moment, and made these impromptu sculptures in front of my paintings. So it's very ephemeral, but I capture it in the photograph. And they could be, what's interesting sometimes as far as scale is that the original piece can sometimes be smaller than the final photograph, or sometimes it's quite a large original piece, and then it becomes a smaller photograph, and that further complicates what you're looking at in the photograph because you sort of know the size of those things. So I try to place them playfully so that that's another little mystery. These are just some visual games that I'd like to plant, and in the, to take my work one step further.
Great. Well, thanks so much, Sarah. And we've just got one more artist to talk about their work, and that is Michelle Weinberg.
Hi, everybody. Such a pleasure to be in this group in person and in the artwork. Yeah, so I selected some recent drawings in which there's a smaller framed drawing mounted within a larger work. And I feel that this process demonstrates this dialogue that I always have within myself about the part of me that's composing and I guess analytical, problem solving, puzzle solving that creates parameters and fits things in. And then another part that like creates space in between things that is less tightly mapped and is about decomposition or spreading things out. And I had done a really large installation with much taller backdrop drawings. These are 48 inches tall here. But I had done one in which the drawings were 10 feet tall. And as I was working on these like rolls of paper, I found myself spending lots of time like moving around different areas, and I would write little phrases or notes to myself. And I felt that what I was doing was basically like fly paper, in which it was sticky, it was hanging, it was catching thoughts and random images floating by. And so this method of making fly paper, my own mental fly paper, was what motivated me to do a few more. So in the show, there are drawings that are more tightly composed and more spread out. And I think overall my inspiration, and I think about inspiration a lot. I don't like wait for it, but it seems to like come and prick me when I'm least expecting it. So there is a back and forth with some kind of spiritual realm there. But I feel that most of my inspiration comes from the material and an impetus to tell a story, to make a broadcast of some sort of fragments, and that I'm interested in spatial relationships always, whether it's a tabletop scenario of a kind of still life, or if it's a larger, more architectural story, that these elements and the space in between them and how they're layered in a shallow space is kind of like a stage set to me. And so even though the story may be abstract, it has a human component in the tactile, the urge to touch or to arrange things, and that the things are not fancy or historically significant, that they're banal, they're everyday, they're bland, but it's the manipulation of them and the rearranging of them that interests me. So these are made with colored pencil and graphite, and Yeah, I think when I work, I'm absorbing the objects and the elements around me in my studio. Often there's floors and walls, and like in this little painting here, there's a notebook, there's a calendar, there's architectural things, windows, doors, light fixtures, chairs, tables, and I feel like just by staying in that realm, that I'm pushing my imagination to extend, I don't know, extend what? Extend my vision, extend my statements. So it's like tumbling things around and mining them and playing with some of the vocabulary of making art in there. There's always words, always words. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you, Michelle. And I'm really glad that you touched on, the fact that your, inspiration a lot of time comes from the material. And that leads us into kind of the discussion of, of inspiration. And I'm just going to bring us all back here. So now we're on the same screen again. And so, the idea of this show being called Daily Muses, that was initially taken from Vickie's artist statement. I was kind of trying to figure out, well, what's going to connect everyone? What's the scope of the show? And I really liked those two words together. I don't think they were necessarily together in her statement, but I really like the way that they could be together. And there's a lot of questions that can come up from that title. And so, I mean, the idea of a muse is a source of inspiration, so, ideas, inspiration, for me in my role here, I take a lot of what I'm inspired by on a daily basis back to my own studio as a painter. And so a lot of conversations I have with artists, or, just talking about the work here with people who come in that are interested in learning more. Even when I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to tell this person that's coming into the gallery, what am I going to tell you about this piece, this very specific thing you asked about, or just something general about the work, that can kind of just trigger something, and it's never something that you expect. And I think that that's just a really interesting part of the creative process. And so, I'd just like to kind of open it up for anyone to comment on that. And I think one thing that struck me when, and I can't remember who was talking, but I thought of this idea of, interests versus inspiration, because we're all interested in things, but that doesn't necessarily drive us to create something new. Like I'm interested in really dark, stormy, cloudy, days, like overcast days. The trees, when they lose all their leaves, at least here in New York State, when they lose their leaves, it's just, there's something about it that I just love. But, and I take that to the studio, but that doesn't necessarily inspire me to make that work. I mean, sometimes it's a deadline, then that's not necessarily inspiration, but you're just forced to make work. So, does anyone have any thoughts or observations you want to share to kind of start the conversation?
I'd like to actually quote someone here. Vickie's face was like, years and years and years ago when I was in the Fountainhead, I remember having a conversation with Sara. And I remember then talking about it with Vickie at work, and Sara she really inspired me, and she was like, you just show up, you just do it every day. You just do it every day. You just sit down and you do it. Like, you don't, whatever comes out, comes out. And then when I discussed that with Vickie, it was like, yeah, you just push yourself. It's a muscle that you exercise, and it doesn't mean anything's going to come from it. It doesn't mean you're going to show it in a gallery, but you have to sit with yourself. And that's hard. It's tough, but that's, I think, separating inspiration, showing up is the first step. it's showing up for yourself, for your studio, and just, yeah, so that's something I always think about constantly. Years later, I still think about that conversation with the two of you. So
Well, I have to jump in here because while you say that, I actually had a very similar conversation with Michelle Lisa a couple of years ago when she was curating an exhibition that she included my work in. And it's kind of the same thing, right? It's about self-care. It's about putting yourself and the work first and front, and nurturing that. And that in and of itself can become your muse. So, you know, thank you, Lisa, Michelle Lisa, again. And that just makes me feel really good. You know, I'm happy that, you know, we all continue to give each other little nuggets of encouragement and inspiration. And we pull it out when we need it, you know? So I just want to say that. In terms of, you know, my daily inspiration or my muse, you know, I'm very deep into the fantasy. So muses all around me, including the original muses, the Greek mythologies, but then also including other mythologies, other cultural mythologies. And then there's just the natural environment, like you were talking, Bradley, about, you know, the trees and the clouds and, you know, the natural setting of being in upstate New York and stormy gray days or cloudy gray days. In Miami, it's the same. In Florida, it's the same. I'm sometimes inspired like from nowhere. You know, I could be driving or watching a woman and her child, and it could be the shape of their two bodies together, and all of a sudden I'll see a shape that I need to make, or a color combination, or you know, a size juxtaposition. And so, I mean, as artists, we all know about, you know, osmosis, right? We're always, it's in the ether, it's in the air. And, you know, so all someone has to do is breathe on you. You know, all of a sudden you've got the muse. So yeah, my inspiration comes from many different places. And sometimes it comes from my own work, old work also. And sometimes a deadline will make you get inspired very quickly. There's that too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, deadlines are for sure, you know, maybe not an inspiration, but a
necessary
motivator.
yeah.
I used to
capitalize the
teach,
evil part.
I used to teach at Miami-Dade College art appreciation classes among studio classes, and 90% of the students had very little exposure to art. So I saw my job was to get them to understand that art is meaningful in everybody's life and why, which to me is like a no-brainer. But one of the things that I found, I would say to them at the beginning and the end, is you are going to look at the world differently. It is noticing, it is observing, it is just seeing. It's really
Absolutely.
simple. And what you do with that observation is what makes it art. Whether it's relationships, whether it's nature, whether it's, you know, I'm thinking about the example of the two different kinds of weather. Okay, Miami is very flat and it's sunny every day and whatever. But if you observe something else, like something in the Everglades, or you go snorkeling and you see something underwater, everything changes because you're noticing, you're seeing something in a different way. You're seeing the light and the color differently than you would have if you were just standing on the beach, for example. And for me, my problem is not having enough time to do, I have never lacked for concepts or ideas. My issue was always finding a way to put them together that was satisfying and also that other people would respond to. So even though doing art has always been, it's just who I am. I couldn't not do it. You know, maybe I'll be one of those people who dies with a pencil in my hand. But I also feel it's important to let other people learn to see. And to me, that's such a gift to be able to, you know, I look out my window and I could tell you about 10 different things I'm seeing. Again, that layering, time, nature, architecture, history. So the bottom line to me is just keeping your eyes open. And there have been times where I've gone into the studio and haven't been able to start working. So what do? You clean, you organize, you rearrange, and all of a sudden the puzzle comes together. How many people do that when they're like in a transition state? Clean your studio.
You know, it frees the mind, right?
Limpiazo.
It also organizes it for me. It helps me see all these different things that I'm noticing and feeling and wanting to put together. And now I'm helping myself understand how to do that.
Yeah.
Partly, I think it's when you stop trying so hard.
Yes.
That's when something happens. So if you go in with too much intent, you can do some, you know, damage. But if you go in and you let it unfold naturally, that's the best way.
Yeah, that was something I really was thinking about this whole time, was like responding to what actually naturally comes to you and makes you want to make, as opposed to responding to trends and requests. And I think it can be really easy to fall into a cycle of making because you're expected to or told to, as opposed to it being fully necessary for your practice to make that thing. I think especially as like, not to say that art becomes trendy, because it's always been trendy, but I think with the speed with which trends cycle through, I mean, you call it 24-hour news cycle, it's kind of the same for trends and style and art. And so what I've found is that I find artists who feel like they have to talk about what is a headline right now. And I'm like, but if you naturally wouldn't talk about this, you wouldn't naturally make art about it. And the work you're going to make about it is going to be bad. And it's not going to feel
Really good point.
And so it's really important for you to make the stuff that actually feels right for you. And I find that as it becomes more of this like front, like artists are like the kind of more front facing in a way. Our work doesn't just sit, there's like all these implications and these assumed things about our work when we share it through social media and all the different ways that you can share it, or when it's in an exhibition that contextualizes it in a certain way, you sometimes get forced to talk about it in a way. Like I get called an activist artist all the time. And I'm like, I don't think you've met a real activist artist. I just talk about my experiences and people take it as activism. You know what I mean? And I make work that is social, but it's not about the same thing, but it's assumed because, you know, there's this, I think as trends go faster and faster, they kind of flatten issues in a way. I think we all can see that issues go from being these like very complicated things and that can drive very long conversations to like a 2-second talking point that like is supposed to kind of get you in the jugular as opposed to get you to talk or get you to be more aware of other people. That's what I try to avoid with my work, is not allowing it to be part of like the flattening of an issue, just like part of the conversation, and then it's just there, you know, like this is in the room, we're talking about Haiti, here's some images of Haiti. They don't tell you too much, they don't make you assume anything. And I think that's like really important, I guess, for me in my practice.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that really makes me, I mean, what you just said, Michelle, Lisa, and then also what Lori was saying, I mean, are very related. I mean, being true to yourself and you know, interested in what you're intrinsically interested in, rather than, you know, what you feel you should be interested in or what you should be paying attention to in your work. Because, you know, ultimately an artist, you know, the sole, you know, job that an artist has is to really tell tell somebody, the world, one person, whoever, what it is that it is inside of you, you know, or how you're processing the world. And I think that, you know, when Lori was talking about looking at the world differently, it's interesting, the more you do that, the more you practice that for yourself, the deeper you can dive into that, rabbit hole. And then, a couple of years pass of you really, in it, and then you start talking to somebody who's not an artist, or someone who's maybe, not well versed at looking at the world differently, and you feel like you're on a totally different plane. So I think that can be a really interesting thing, and you never know what is gonna, what you're gonna find interesting in the world. And I think that, through our artwork, that's what makes the world even richer to live in, the things that we realize about the world. And it's like art is, you're inspired by the world, but then also your art inspires the world for you, maybe not for other people, but just the way that you interact with the world because of what you've done in the studio, or what you've, experienced through other people's work. So I find that to be just a very enriching part of being an artist. And then also, through what we do here too.
Yeah. Something that Lori said about being not muted, okay. Being open, to what's happening around you. I really think that that's being open to the experience and to feeling these things, I guess in a way, leaving your heart open, looking at all the details around you. For me, I am an athlete, and I'm also an educator, and I'm an artist. And so having these parts of myself, I always thought that they were separate entities. And when I really came into my own as a visual artist, it was when I realized that they feed each other. And one without the other, I'm not complete. Like, my mental health is off, my openness, my ability to keep myself honest, all of those things go off kilter. And I very much can say that moving my body and pushing myself to extremes and being in the outdoors and seeing the earth in a wild state is without a doubt spiritually fulfilling. And I see so much that inspires my work and makes my head go a million miles a minute. And it also brings out a very primitive, raw sense of my human state, of who I am. And but then also, as an educator, and when I say educator, whether that's in the classroom, whether I'm working for a non-for-profit, whether I'm privately, tutoring, or whatever that is, or working in a museum, it keeps you honest. There's, how can you be guiding these people and wanting to empower them and wanting to enrich them and want the best for them, and you yourself are not bestowing that upon yourself and not living that truth. And so if you're sitting and, children, people know when you're not doing it, and so I think it's a beautiful relationship to when you're helping others and you're empowering others and you're sharing your wealth of knowledge. And you yourself, when you go back to your studio, you're like, okay, I gotta own it, so that's, and also people are inspiring, like being able to connect with others. So while you're educating them, a lot of times, like, you can teach art, but you're not really teaching art. You're talking about life, you're teaching them about life. And that journey, that I love, like stories, I love adventure, like that in itself is its own little, like, whoosh, and that becomes an inspiration. So a 5-year-old or a 80-year-old can inspire you, and you just, I don't know, I think it's you got to be open to it, and you have to find out, I don't know, I think I always tell my students, I'm like, you have to figure out what your internet dialogue is, what your narrative is, who are you, what keeps you honest, what keeps you looking at the world, looking around you, and then that in itself keeps you in your gratitude and keeps you also self-reflecting. And then that manifests in your work, and then hopefully you can kind of help somebody else. Oh, that's,
That really, I mean, I had one thing I wanted to comment on about what you said, but then what you just ended on made me really think about. So when I was a kid, I didn't really, I wasn't a good student. I didn't really become a good student until I was in college, because I don't think I had the ability to really be inspired by, my teachers. I was somewhat interested in what they were saying, but it's, unless you really connect on it on a certain level, it's not going to be something you're like really inspired to do. So, and I think that, the people that are teaching us, if we're truly inspired by them, that's going to make us learn more. That's going to make us want to learn more. And I think without that, without being inspired by the people who teach us, the teachers, then it's difficult to kind of, you need to be modeled, the behavior needs to be modeled, like what you're, like how to be an artist. Like you can learn how to make the art, right? But you're missing that key element, which is finding that voice that's your own. And then that, inspiration is a big part of that, because if you're not inspired or interested in something, then whatever you make is probably gonna be pretty bland, so it's really important to be an educator and to inspire others. So that's great.
Yeah.
Well, so I think there's probably many other avenues to go down. I don't know does anyone have any kind of things they'd like to start, like a last part of the discussion, or feel content?
Well, I could add one thing from my experience, because I've just moved locations, and I was surprised to find how much location is important to me. And yet I don't, and space and light, and I don't depict, I'm not really, I never make it look like it's a room or a seascape or outside or inside. And yet the space around me, and moving into a new studio recently, I feel so influenced by the physical space that I'm in, much more than I ever would have realized. So I think that's very inspiring for me to make a change in where I'm making my work. I don't know if anybody else.
Yeah, light.
Dreamy.
Yeah, space is very important.
Space is very important. Absolutely.
I mean, but do you think
If you can get it.
Have you been influenced by the new space to make a change, Vickie?
Yes. Yes. Yes, I am very much inspired to make.
Ooh la la.
Oh, you think that
It's literally killing me. So yay. Yay for new space, but it's killing me.
Oh man. Are you looking at the ocean?
No, but I do have a green garden that I look out, which is really, really nice. It's part of the landscaping of the property. So that's why I had to get the second light, because the daylight was leaving quickly. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, my daylight left a long time ago.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's gonna start getting dark for you real soon.
But we'll have daylight savings. Sure.
It happened already, really. It already happened. It's very strange, the way that the sun goes down, and the way the shadows become these very slanted, dramatic shadows. But I was
You use a lot of shadows in your work. I was thinking of
really,
that when we looked at the one piece with the wire hanging off of it. And it creates these shadows that you mimic sometimes with your spray paint or your blurred brush strokes. Did you notice?
I like seeing the shadows. Of course, they're fascinating.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't usually, I always leave shadows behind because I don't want to be seen. Don't want to feel like I'm just depicting something. But a lot of the time, the shadows are really very fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, you
For
can
me,
say
the
they're
color,
shadows, or you can say they're ghost images also, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Michelle.
All right,
I
well,
was gonna mention the color also, the color of the flowers up here, these incredibly beautiful jewel-like colors really had a big influence on my work, on using a lot of those colors.
Oh,
Yeah.
Sarah, can I tell you, when you introduced to me Yupo paper, that
Yeah.
rocked my world.
I'm like moving
That
away.
Yupo paper, man.
It's really fun.
It's like,
Recently I bought,
Yeah.
it's linen that is already primed with a clear primer. And so you can put it up on the wall and it's already primed, but it doesn't have any, it's not white, it's like the linen color.
oh, that's cool.
Interesting new thing but the surface is so sealed up that it's almost like working on Yupo paper a little bit.
Yeah. Oh,
It's
that's
really
nice.
good
That is
surface.
really nice. That is nice. Yeah, it's funny how like you see certain materials, or like you'll go in the store and you're like, oh, you're sexy. Like you're like, hello. Like you see like the row of inks or something, you're like, oh, I need more of
Yeah.
this.
That's my jewelry store. Art store is my jewelry store.
I think it's safe to say that we're all inspired by material, maybe sometimes before anything else, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
I
Very
have
much.
to go. I'm very sorry.
Well, I think we're
Me
going to we're going to end it here. Just want to tell people that Daily Muses runs through October 20th, and gallery hours are Wednesday and Thursday from Tuesday and Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 3 p.m. and Thursday through Saturday from 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. And if you're not able to see the show in person, we have two other, as I mentioned before, two other videos on our YouTube channel. And then we also have an album of photographs of the show on our Flickr page. And you can find links to all of those things on our website, which is mainstreetartscs.org. I'd like to thank all of the artists today for joining us. We'll show all of our faces again here. There we go. Thank you all for joining us and for sharing your work with us through this exhibition, and for talking about it, and for engaging in this discussion. So appreciate you
Thank
all.
you.
And
Thank you.
Thank you, Bradley.
all of
Thank
you
you to
who joined us
Vickie
tonight.
and
Thank you,
Bradley
ladies.
and to
Thank you,
everyone.
Vicky.
We miss you, Julie.
Yes, we miss you, Julie.
Yes,
I
we
miss
do.
all of you.
Oh,
All right.
Love.
Well,
Good night.
take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
thank you, Bradley. Thank you, guys.